haven't been up here long, and already I think I've started to lose muscle density. On a more positive note, it would appear my bone density has remained unaffected. Triple action. Removes grease, fights odors, preserves one's dignity while attempting to squeeze through a narrow opening. The Holy Trinity. If you want a job done around here, you've got to do it yourself. Whilst that did smell like a spring breeze, it did chafe a turd. I think I'd better go carb-free when we go back to old Blighty. It's a precision-engineered German motorized screwdriver. As I said to the boys on our rugby tour of the Netherlands back in '87, I'm not touching that without adequate protection. I'm fairly certain this is in breach of a myriad of health and safety regulations. That switch activates the self-destruct sequence. If you could bottle it, you'd make a fortune. It's part of the laboratory equipment the biologist we were supposed to have on board brought. I'm not sure what happened to him. No one's seen him for weeks. Not to worry. I'm sure he'll turn up. It isn't great for the environment. Replacement ribbons are a real biohazard. The box is sealed shut. Why, it would be impossible to determine the fate of any biological life form inside. I think it would be best if I did something else with this. It doesn't appear to be working. It's not the worst idea I've ever heard. I remember it has a warmth that you simply don't get with digital, especially if you burn the sleeve as well. There's nothing on the turntable. Preserved thanks to the tireless efforts of hipsters from all corners. The biggest floor filler since concrete. Genuine British compressed air. I've always thought it was a big risk having an airlock. I'm not sure the insurance would cover us if we were burgled. I don't feel suitably dressed to be heading out. Let's see. Not. We made that mistake once before. It might fit Alan's dainty hand. I've a bit more girth. I don't think they'd get along. The static is making my hair stand on end. The other toys left aren't nearly as exciting. The other toys left aren't nearly as exciting. As I said to the boys on our rugby tour of the Netherlands back in '87, I'm not touching that without adequate protection. I fear we may need to curtail this imaginative thinking. I can't use these two together. I doubt combining these two will prove to be particularly useful. You have to admire the build quality. It might fit Alan's dainty hand. I've a bit more. The technology predates most Brexit supporters by at least 40 years. Mild English cheddar cheese. I'm sure there's a more practical use for this. We'll agree to disagree about that. I think it would be best if I did something else with this. It's not the worst idea I've ever heard. I remember when they talked about keeping BBC Three. I don't think they'd get along. I fear we may need to curtail this imaginative thinking. I can't use these two together. I doubt combining these two will prove to be particularly useful. Right. I'll have this open in a jiffy. Manufactured by decent, honest, working-class Brits in 1974. Gosh, really helps you to... I'm sure there's a more practical use for this. We'll agree to disagree about that. Once more onto the breach we go. I think it would be best if I did something else with this. It's not the worst idea I've ever heard. I remember when they talked about keeping BBC Three. If you could bottle it, you'd make a fortune. I don't think they'd get along. I fear we may need to curtail this imaginative think. I can't use these two together. Gosh, it's full of the blighters. I doubt combining these two will prove to be particularly useful. I'm sure there's a more practical use for this. We'll agree to disagree about that. I think it would be best if I did something else with this. It's not the worst idea I've ever heard. I remember when they talked about I don't think they'd get along. I fear we may need to curtail this imaginative thinking. I'm sure there's another more rational use for this. It's a box used to store tools, commonly referred to as a tool box, I believe. believe the isolation of space.
Aren't you supposed to be downstairs turning the power off and on?
I can't use these two together. I like the chap, but not in that way. Sub-Lieutenant Jones!
Aye, boyo?
I'm just going outside, and maybe sometime. Any parting thoughts?
You couldn't hurry it up a bit, boyo. I'm getting bored looking at the same old view.
Bored? Looking at the infinite majesty and wonder of the stars.
I meant looking at you.
For the most part, I think things have been going quite well so far, don't you?
I guess our ship hasn't been ripped apart by a cloud of space debris traveling at an unavoidable velocity, catapulting us into the abyss of space, causing us to float aimlessly until our inevitable oxygen-starved deaths.
That's the spirit. Are you sure there's nothing else we can do in here to get things moving?
Continually talking to me is certainly keeping you from moving.
I do enjoy our little chats. I go, look how I go, faster than an arrow from Cupid's bow.
I doubt continually quoting Shakespeare verbatim will improve things enough to get us that Writers Guild nomination.
There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
All that glisters isn't gold, boyo.